So recently I went through a phase where I felt disconnected from my desire to live a more simple, minimalist lifestyle. I was living in another apartment and had a lot of stuff. Author Benjamin Hardy wrote, "If you don't shape your environment, it will shape you." And this was definitely true for me. I felt uninspired, dull, moody. At one point, I was literally visualizing living in an empty apartment with just a bed and the absolute basics like a toothbrush, a cup and a plate. Nothing else but space. However, you can't always control your environment, but what you can control are your actions. So lately, I've been revisiting why I was originally drawn to minimalism and living simply, what it means to me, what I hope to achieve. And a big reason is how it makes me feel. It grounds me, helps me to focus on the things I care about. And I found that there are 5 proactive steps I can take that will lighten up my mood and make me feel happier. Even, or perhaps especially, when my environment pushes me in a different direction. Hi, my name is Peter, and on this channel we talk about living with intention. Minimalism, slow living, that kind of stuff. And I share what I do, what works for me, and what doesn't, in the hope that you gain some value out of it. Something I've noticed that tends to happen when I'm feeling down is I start to develop tunnel vision. It's like I put on dark sunglasses and now everything comes in through this gloomy filter. Now for me, living in a cramped space brought me down. It was like having a huge silent to-do list, which is this idea coined by Fumio Sasaki that every item in your living space has needs and wants to be cared for. Play this board game, water the dying plant, fix the light switch. I feel like I sound like a bit of a nut when I say it was overwhelming. But I guess after experiencing the calm and peace of an organized minimal living space with few items surrounding me, it's harder to maintain that state of mind in an apartment that's full of stuff. In those moments, the solution may seem easy. How can I change my environment? And yeah, if it was my own apartment, I could declutter it and make it more minimal. But if I'm feeling down, only changing my surroundings isn't the end-all be-all solution. As human beings, we are prone to something called hedonistic adaptation, which is the tendency to quickly return to a base level of happiness, no matter what happens to you or what change you make around you. Plus, I can't always control my environment. And then what? What I can do is change my perception of that environment. We all have this built-in negativity bias, which evolved to help us survive, but it doesn't make for a happy life. So I've learned that I need to be more proactive when I don't feel my best. And something that's worked for me is trying to see the beauty in the mundane, to be grateful for the things I normally take for granted. Like, isn't it amazing that I woke up this morning, opened up the curtains and saw a beautiful blue sky with just a few clouds? There's water running from the tap, had enough to go anywhere to go get it, and I can even take a hot shower. And the couch, it's so comfortable, I wouldn't know what I'd do without it. Someone designed it, others made it, it was transported here. If it wasn't for these hard-working people, I would not be able to enjoy sitting on it. You get the idea. I find being more intentional, trying to see beauty in the mundane, it helps me to snap out of a bad mood. Another thing that tends to lift my spirits is going outside. In a city, I like to just walk around and people watch. It gets me out of my head. There's always so much going on. Markets, people having lunch, musicians. I've even bumped into an Easter procession. I like to just take it all in. And when I crave peace and tranquility, I love to go on a hike. The Japanese practice something called Shinrin-yoku, which translates as forest bathing. It doesn't mean taking an actual water bath, but instead being immersed in nature, taking in the forest through your senses. It's about taking your time, aimless wandering, feeling the breeze on your skin, listening to the birds singing or the sound of a waterfall. And to me, connecting with nature in this way is literally a bridge to instant joy and calm. One thing that always improves my mood is my first coffee of the day. My day doesn't really start before I have my first cup. At home or when I'm working from a co-working space, I grind my own beans and then use an AeroPress to make the coffee. I especially love coffee beans from Brazil and Costa Rica. But what I like even better though is going to a specialty coffee shop and having a barista make a filter coffee like a V60. There's just something about sitting in a cafe that makes me feel good instantly. I love the ambiance, the smell of freshly ground coffee and cake, the chit-chat noise and lo-fi music in the background. I like to people watch, brainstorm video ideas or just think. 3 years ago, I spent a week in Florence, or Firenze as the Italians say, on my own. And what was supposed to be a well-deserved holiday after working hard for months became a bit of a nightmare. I quickly checked off the main sites, but it was cold and rainy and I wasn't dressed for that. And I even got bronchitis. The walls were coming at me in my tiny Airbnb room and I felt very lonely. It was like this dark cloud coming over me. I hadn't felt like that in a very long time. It's funny when I think back to it, but what I ended up doing was finding a specialty coffee shop when I felt a little bit better, getting a coffee and reading Atomic Habits on my Kindle. Now this probably sounds crazy to some. I was on holiday in Italy, but that's what I needed at that moment to ground me and make me feel better. Oh, my phone. I have a hate-love relationship with it. It makes my life better in so many ways. Google Maps, staying in touch with my friends and family. It's easy to capture notes quickly or order food. To make sure I'm not constantly interrupted, I have turned off most notifications, except for those related to work or some people close to me. And my phone is always on mute, but it's still a time and attention suck. If I don't keep my screen time in check, it's so easy to go down the rabbit hole, going from one news article to the next, or scrolling on Instagram without end. The thing is, almost never does that type of behavior make me feel any better. It's often the opposite. Compulsively checking my phone is not relaxing. And reading what's wrong in the world or seeing other people painting a perfect picture of their life doesn't help either. So one way I keep my phone use under control is by keeping it in another room. Not when I work, because then I need it, but on the weekend or at night, I'll put it in my bedroom for a few hours. Or when I go on a hike in the forest, I leave it at home. It's strange, but when my phone is within my peripheral vision, it's so easy to grab it out of boredom. But when it's out of sight and I'm reading a book, I'm not tempted to check my phone, and I can focus on what I'm reading. In his book Deep Work, Cal Newport writes that being deeply focused can get you into a flow state, which in turn generates happiness. So if you're on your phone a lot, first hit that subscribe button to see more videos like this, and then put it in another room for a few hours, or in a drawer, and do something you find meaningful instead in that time. When I was young, I used to read a ton of books. I'd read entire series. I'd go to the library every couple of weeks, excited about finding something new to read. Over time, I lost that habit. It's not that I didn't read anymore, but months could go by without reading a single book. And due to the distractions of my phone and the pressures from work, when I did read, I often found it difficult to get into it and focus. When Netflix shows are always just one finger click away, picking up a book gets harder. It requires commitment. But watching TV is like eating popcorn, whereas reading a book is like eating a stew. It takes more time, but it's also more satisfying. A while back, I made a conscious decision to build up a reading habit again. I'm reading a couple of books each month now, and I'm loving it. When I'm immersed in a book, everything that troubles me just disappears. For me, the trick is to read books I enjoy. There was a time where I felt I had to read serious books. Self-help books to improve my life, or classic literature like Kafka or Dostoevsky. And I've read my fair share of classic literature in the past, but more often than not, it was a real challenge to get through the book. But I've realized if I want to build a reading habit, I have to make sure I read books I resonate with. I want to read for enjoyment, to learn new things, and to learn how I can improve my life. But most of all, I want to be someone who reads consistently. So 15 years ago, I read Donna Tartt's The Secret History. I remember I was totally sucked into the story. I literally sat in a chair for 2 days and I didn't leave the house until I had finished it. It was so good. I reread it 10 years later. And not too long ago, I read Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. It's a buddy story between an astronaut and an alien who team up in the Tau Ceti system to figure out how they can save their respective civilizations. It brought back memories of when I was young. I would sometimes lie in bed and visualize being an astronaut in a spacesuit, drifting through the vastness of the universe. Now that's the feeling I want to have when I read books now. And I pick my books based on that. I'm reading Charlie and the Chocolate Factory now by Roald Dahl. It's a kid's book, but I don't care. I've never read it and I'm thoroughly enjoying it. I'm reading for me, not for anyone else. And reading a good book expands my horizon and cheers me up. If you're struggling to read books, I published a video about my 7 best tips to read more books. These tips help me build my reading habit, and you can check it out right here. Thanks for watching, take care, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!